To call to order the Monday, February 8th ACSD board meeting. Before we start with introductions, it's always great when you can start off congratulating a board member. And Kyle, I believe you received a special student award recently, naming you a student of the semester, I believe, from Hannaford. Could you tell us a little bit about that award so that we can then all give you a round of applause?
Oh boy, okay. Sure. So my internet's a little odd, but it was an award based off of character of leadership, academic performance, ethics, and master of content of the curriculum. And it's a course I'm taking called Human Services. So I'm honored to be awarded that Outstanding Student Award. And it's a very great honor. And thank you.
Well, on behalf of the board, way to go, Kyle. That sounds like a great award. So with that, why don't we start with introductions? My name is Mary Cullinane, ACSD Board. Peter B.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Chip.
Welcome.
Lorraine.
Lorraine Morse.
Will.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Mary G.
Mary Gill.
Amy.
Amy McGlashan.
Jen.
Jen Newseater.
Victoria.
Victoria Jetty.
Betty.
Betty Kafumbe.
Peter C.
Peter Conlon.
Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck.
Fernandez.
Fernanda Canales.
Dana.
Dana Desmarais.
Dana.
Dana Peterson, Superintendent Director at the Hannaford Career Center.
Kyle.
Kyle Mitchell, Student Board Member.
Jory.
Jory Jacobite.
Henry.
Henry Carpenter, Student Representative.
Caitlin.
Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Vicki.
Vicki Wells, Director of Student Services.
Jen.
Jen Kravitz, Mary Hogan Principal.
Peg. Peg Martin.
I am unmuted and I'm here.
Great. Laura.
Laura Lavaca, Director of Food Service.
Super. And Davina already introduced herself as well. Peter, at this time, could you share who is on as attendees?
Yep. We have Barb Wilson, Bjarke Sears, Cheryl Cesario, Chris Kramer, Dee Birdhoff, Esther Thomas, Q McLaughlin, MCTV, Ruth Bernstein, Tammy Johnson, Tanya Scuteri, and Zoe Noble.
Great. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. At this time, as all times, we offer the opportunity for the public to provide input via public comment. If you could raise your Zoom hand, and then Peter will bring you over to the panelist portion for your comment.
Okay, Esther Thomas.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Is it okay if I speak now? Is this the right time? Okay, hi. I'm new to this. I am Esther Thomas, and I just wanted to introduce myself. I am running for the one-year term select board seat. If you have any questions, you can reach me at Esther for Middlebury on Facebook. Please reach out. Thank you.
you. Looks like Dana, you have your hand up?
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to chime in on Kyle's recognition. My understanding is that in addition to being a student of the quarter, he has been very active at the state level on diversity and inclusion. And I just wanted to put in a plug for Kyle and his work. And I haven't had a chance to connect with him since there has been some publication in the Rutland Herald about his work. And I just wanted to honor him and recognize him publicly myself, since he was the student of the quarter for last quarter. So thanks again, Kyle, for all your work, and we really appreciate you at the Career Center.
Kyle, my apologies for saying student of the semester. I could just keep going and saying it's student of the decade. You'd probably fill that as well. So congratulations all around. Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Oh,
I see one hand there, Peter. Do you see that?
yep, it just came up. Yep. Zoe Noble.
So surprised, sorry, it's not Zoe Noble, in fact. It's Zoe Noble's mom, Mary Heather. She uses this computer for her Zoom session, so I'm not going to change the information. But I did have a couple things that I wanted to talk about, and I'll try to be brief. I know we've got a lot on the agenda tonight. So first of all, my name's Mary Heather Noble. I was on a member of the steering committee for the Facilities Master Plan, and I am currently a candidate for the Middlebury position on the board. So I have a couple of things that I'm just going to read off some notes because that's just going to keep my brain on track a little bit more. And if I need to post or send to Jory, I'm happy to do so for your minutes. I guess first thing I want to say is I just want to express my support for the temporary, underline temporary pause in the Facilities Master Planning process, particularly in light of all the urgent matters facing the board right now. Obviously, this includes filling the business manager position and the MUMS principal position, the extremely important work of assessing and addressing the academic and other impacts of the COVID crisis on our kids, and also coming to a resolution on the deficiencies concerning the proposed MUMS schedule and plan for next year's transition of 6th grade to the middle school. And I guess I just want to elevate this last matter. I think a lot of folks have been hearing anecdotally from members of the MUMS community that the revised schedule, the revised plan, I guess it's 3.0. I don't know if it's been revised beyond that yet, but my understanding is that it still has significant issues with respect to instructional time, and that educators are concerned that they may not be able to deliver their full curriculum to prepare students adequately for their IB coursework at the high school. So this alone is an important matter, coupled with the additional work of assessing and addressing pandemic recovery. I think that teacher confidence in the MUMS plan is paramount. And I say this because I think MUMS is the place where I think disparities between student achievement are, most evident. It's the entry point for students into their secondary school education. They're coming from 7 different elementary schools with very different learning environments. And so I think the work of getting everyone on the same page really falls heavily on our MUMS educators. And so when you consider that, next year there's going to be not 1, but 2 incoming classes to do that with. In addition to pandemic recovery work, I think that's a real heavy lift for our educators there. So if ever there was a time to really reinforce our support for MUMS students and educators, I think that time is now. And so I just want to bring this particular issue front and center. So there's been discussion about it kind of from the mom's staff level, but I just want to bring it up as a community member. I think it's really important because the repercussions of instructional time weigh heavily, both in terms of just immediate recovery, academic recovery for students, but also potential impacts into their high school coursework. And the other thing that I think needs to be acknowledged is the potential for this transition, the sixth grade transition, to be viewed by the community as sort of a test for transitions to come with broader facilities master plan configurations. So I think it's really important to get this right, and to get it right, I think you really need your educators on board and fully supported. So I just want to make sure I bring that up as a community member. And then the other thing, I'm not sure if this has been widely discussed yet, but I do want to bring this up as a community member. I received some emails from some folks regarding the records request that was submitted and the subsequent review and analysis by Cornwall resident and board candidate Chris Kramer. And I think just as a board candidate, I feel a little bit obligated to just make a statement about it. So I'll just read real briefly. First of all, for me, the letter highlights three things. One, it just underscores just the importance of acknowledging the emotions around this, the anxiety, anger, just emotions that folks are feeling about these changes, potential losses in their community schools. This anxiety is evident in this particular letter that's been circulating around Cornwall. It's evident in the actions he took to draft a petition to withdraw in the first place. I know it hasn't been submitted. And it was evident in the votes in Ripton and in Weybridge. And so I think it's natural, folks have the impulse to protect the places where they educate their kids. They're sort of second homes, and any changes to that feels scary. And so I think it's important for ongoing public participation efforts in this planning process to really hold space for that expression. Secondly, I think this letter underscores the importance of transparency in the facilities master planning process. The main focus of the letter seems to be some kind of like an insinuation that the board's changing focus from a 3-school configuration to a 4-school configuration was somehow done outside objective data. And I just want to say, I do agree in principle that it's really important for folks to see the roadmap that has led the board from a 3-school model to a 4-school model. And I think the board probably should communicate those factors sooner than later, perhaps even before resuming the process in the fall. But I do want to make just an observation about this issue of objectivity. Consideration of a 4-school model that includes Shoreham and Cornwall on itself is not without logic or merit. Both of those schools serve significantly more students than Bridport does, and it's not unreasonable to expect that a transportation study or the preliminary results of one would reveal increased costs and perhaps even unacceptable travel time with busing all of those students to Bridport. So I think, I think that's not something that would be necessarily surprising. And I think it's also possible that, looking at a 4-school model might offer a little more flexibility with respect to drawing boundaries and creating socioeconomically diverse school communities, which is, a critical factor that was identified in this whole planning process. So I just want to make the observation that I don't think it should surprise anyone that there are several factors that influence that, or that will influence how the board is looking at school configuration. And I don't think it should surprise anyone that the board and administration respond with concern to things that might unravel the district. They're obviously committed to a unified district because that's the structure that the voters have decided will enable the most consistent and efficient delivery of a high quality K through 12 education to all students in our learning district. So we want our representatives on the board and admin to act in the best interest of the district. And the bottom line is we have large scale problems as a learning community to solve. And we all want what's best for our kids over the long haul. And I'm not sure that calling for a thorough sort of rehashing, recombing through internal review of the process is necessarily the best way to accomplish that. So and the last thing, I think this issue kind of underscores, the lengths to which folks can be compelled to go to avoid or delay really difficult conversations that need to be had in this process. And, I know that impulse to distrust a process that has the potential to yield something that's undesirable is, it's very real. I saw it when I used to work as an environmental regulator. I'm embarrassed to admit I've succumbed to it as a parent advocating for my kids' education. That impulse to feel like this process, fill in the blank, whether it's a permitting process or an IEP evaluation process or the facilities master planning process, if it's not feeling like it's going to go your way, it's very easy to feel like there must be something nefarious about that process. And I guess I just want to point out that's human. I feel like mistakes are going to be made along the way because we're human, and emotions are going to get the best of us because we're human. This is a community scale decision, and it's inherently messy, and people like to avoid messes. But meanwhile, we have educators who are feeling a little bit burned out from this very difficult year, and they need stability and support. And we have kids who may be falling off the radar because remote learning isn't working for them. And we have important vacancies to fill, and a sixth grade transition to oversee, and decisions to make about facilities and building improvements, and how we're going to configure the schools, and ultimately, in the long run, what we're going to do about maintaining financial stability to serve our kids over the long run. So I guess I just want to say that, I really appreciate and agree with suggestions and the efforts to improve transparency. That is something that is really near and dear to my heart. But I do find any efforts to really rehash and go over and re-examine, and review what's been done so far. I find it to be, I worry that it would be a distraction and a delay from the really important work that the board needs to do in service of all our kids. And that's all I've got. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks everyone as always. Next on the agenda is the Salisbury Community School presentation.
Well, so I guess I would like to begin with how incredibly fortunate I am to be in the Salisbury community. This is my 15th year as principal. And it is a community that is very dear to my heart. I have always felt incredibly supported by the community, and we have an incredible staff that has worked very hard all of these years. And I was trying to figure out how to do a presentation that would represent who we are. And we had many options. However, because of the type of year that it is, I invited the students to reflect on what it feels like to be in school this year, what they might appreciate, what might be hard. And then I asked a couple of 5th grade students to help me put together a little slideshow for you, a little presentation, a movie that they made with their voices. So I would like to say thank you to Levi Newseeder and Caitlin Gillette for their help on putting together this presentation for you. I think Peter's going to show it to you. It's a short movie that we made. And then I am open to questions. I can answer lots of questions. I'm not really sure how much information you would like about us, but I'm very open to whatever questions you might have.
Okay, here we are.
Uh-oh. Can you hear the voices? Peter, is there a way to do the volume?
People can't hear the voices?
I don't think it can be heard.
No.
Are you hearing anything?
No.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer, because the voices is what counts.
I know. Well, I'm unmuted here, so I'm not sure why, at least it's not picking up on my microphone.
Yeah, there's a setting somewhere, Peter, I learned about it the other day and I can't tell you where it is, but that you have to like close out your screen, allow it to share audio, and then share your screen again.
Let me see down here if I can.
A lot of things differently because of COVID.
There you go.
Building our desk is important because it was the first project we did together and we could use them all year. The tents are important because they let us be outside in winter. Mr. Friends Cuddy drove all the way to Connecticut in a U-Haul to get our yellow desks. Miss Canales and Miss Hayes love being graded by all of our dogs each morning when they take our temperatures.
I like coming to school because I like doing body breaks. I like coming to school because I like being with all the people in my classroom.
I have learned how to be safe enough to be in school.
And I have gotten good at making sure I am a wingspan away from my friends in line. At first, I couldn't breathe with a mask on, and now I can. I like using the monkey bars, and it's a nice play space.
So, I learned that I'm capable of much more things that I knew of. I don't know that I could go this long without a hug. And it's hard, but it's also teaching me patience and new reality. Mm-hmm. And it's teaching me how to be kinder, more persevere. And it's just really awesome, but also terrible at the same time.
What's important about being in school is having always available help. I usually need some extra help in things like math to understand it's a lot harder to focus when I have a lot more distractions than I usually would. As much as I hate getting up in the morning, I still think it's important for me to learn.
Go.
The main reason I feel I need school in person every day is because of the intellectual stimulation that I gain from all my classes and teachers. The second most thing is the fact that I do not have to homeschool again by myself. And the final reason is because of the library and its plentiful collection of books of all colors and sizes and shapes, and of all stories.
So what is good about eating lunch outside?
Well, you get to talk, and when you're inside, you don't really talk as much.
Yeah, and you kind of get to be with friends.
Yes, and you have to face one way inside.
Yeah.
Face.
Okay.
It's more freedom. Yeah.
It's cold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never actually really that cold, but I love eating outside with my friends because I just don't like sitting inside watching the shows that they have on or like brain games and stuff. I just like talking to my friends and stuff and connecting with them.
The boys.
We also found new ways to celebrate and be joyful. In December, our friends group put up lights around our school. We made lanterns in art and invited families for a drive-through to drink hot cocoa and enjoy an outdoor slideshow of our school year so far. Bye, guys. See you tomorrow.
So that's a little glimpse on what school is like for us right now and some of the things that are important to the kids. And I will say that there were many more voices that were not included that really talked about that what they really value about being an in-person school is the connections that they're making with their friends and their teachers every day. And that is felt. It has been a very different year. We do feel that the students really appreciate their space and their time in school. It's amazing the things that have changed. We have very little, we have very few behavior problems that we have to deal with or respond to because they really are in a place where they are taking care of one another much more. And we felt that especially today after a very difficult weekend for our community. So our kids have, and our community really hangs together and understands and appreciates. And for that, I'm really grateful.
That's
Any
great.
questions or thoughts?
Thank you, Fernanda.
You know, kids are something. There's always been those shows with kids say those things. I was struck by the one child that talked about the lack of hugs and then talked about some of the positives of the other side and that both it was wonderful and it was awful. And I think that sort of expressed to me what all of us feel in this world. Here we are having a meeting with Zoom, which is amazing. 20 years ago, I don't know how we'd function. And yet on the other side, God, I just hate not being in the presence of my friends. Their faces and voices are fine, but the kids just sort of synthesize that right down to the basic. And I was struck by that.
Thank you, Chip. Peter C.?
I really love the ability to sort of get inside and see what schooling is like during this time. Fernanda, could you talk a little bit about one, how often is sort of the pandemic part of the conversation? And two, since you do have the kids in there 5 days a week, how different is education right now compared to, a year ago?
So it's interesting because I think that with every, having school every day has really made us appreciate the situation more. So what we thought would be difficult and challenging at the beginning really wasn't. One of those things was children wearing masks. We really were concerned that that would be something that they would not be willing to do, or that would be problematic or just uncomfortable. And they're pretty oblivious to mask wearing right now. They're just, that is just a matter of being together, and they don't question it. We don't have to deal with it. It's nothing that we have to address on a daily basis. Like the rest of us, our masks, depending on the size of your nose, might fall below, and all we have to say is, mask up, please, and off, and up it goes. spacing, and like I said, the kids have new vocabulary, like wingspan away. All you have to say is remind them and say, please, be in your wingspans, and they separate and they're fine. All of that has become part of our routine, and it really is a routine right now, and it gives us space to do all the other wonderful things about being together. I will say that our kids are learning, they're thriving. It's not perfect, and it's not always what we want it to be, right? We don't have the freedom to go on field trips and do some of the traditional things that we have, and they miss those things. They definitely miss those things. Keek is a tradition that we've had for years that we're not going to be having this year, and we're trying to figure out how to replace those things. So that slideshow, that presentation that we where we invited families in for hot cocoa, we really didn't know how it was going to turn out. We had an outside inflatable screen, and it was a drive-through. And we had 100 people came to that evening in a short span of time, and they really enjoyed it, and it was a way for us to celebrate together. So I think that it's making us more creative in some ways. There are things that kids definitely miss, and being with each other outside of school, play dates, and trying to figure out ways of, they miss one another outside. And so we really try to create time and space for them to be able to enjoy each other. So eating lunch outside is one of those things. When they eat inside, because of the proximity, they can't really be chatting. And like they said, they have to be sitting frontward. We had to go back to, we've always had tables where we sit as a group, in small groups. Now we have desks, everybody's in individual desks. But I think that we've adapted, and to be frank, when I see the kids participating in their learning and their conversations, I was doing observations the other day. I feel like they're being themselves, and they're really, and they're learning and they're growing and they're asking questions, and the conversations are rich, so they're engaged.
Lorraine? Oh, Lorraine's still on mute.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Now we can.
Yeah, please thank your students. That was a wonderful presentation. I mean, the part about the hugging, I'm a big hugger, so I mean, I teared up a couple of times. They were so eloquent and so, so sincere, and it was wonderful to hear them.
Thank you.
Hear their thoughts.
Yeah, I had a different idea for the script, I will say. When I met with the students, they're like, nah, we need to say this, or we need to say that, or why don't we, and they took it on, and, and they changed it. And I have to say that one of my favorite things of the day is taking the morning temperatures and seeing everybody's dogs. Somehow we're going to figure out how to do a dog parade. The dogs are awesome, and they come every morning.
That's great. I can leave my dog with you all day, Fernanda, if you ever want that experience throughout the day for yourself.
Yeah. We've done other things like Fun Fridays. The kids wanted to celebrate more, and so this is the 5th and 6th graders again. They've taken a huge leadership role. They have picked different ways of dressing every Friday, so that we are, dressing differently every Friday. We've had, I think you saw, Dress Fancy Day. We've had Wacky Day. We've had Theme Day, where each classroom is different. So we're trying to figure out ways of having joy together, and those 5th and 6th graders put together all school meetings through Zoom, so that every class is represented, and they play little games and do, jokes with the kids, and we try to maintain that culture of the fact that we're all one, even though we really can't be together as one. So we're in pods, and those pods don't mix. So they come in through different entries, so there is a definite change to the way that we've always been, but we have found ways of like holding that thread, and being able to still feel that closeness.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, outstanding. It's a great way to, kick off a board meeting, I got to tell you. So thank you all very, very much. right. Next on the docket is to approve the minutes of January 25th. Could I get a motion to approve minutes?
So moved.
Lorraine, and could I get a second? Amy? Great. Any comments or questions on the minutes? All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Great. Next is to approve the ACSD bills. Chip, you're on mute.
There was one set of bills. They were read on the 1st of February out of the general fund account, $308,912.28. The bills were all okayed, and I make a motion to accept the bills.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And perfect. Any opposed? So moved. Next up is report of the superintendent.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna open my notes here. So a couple of things I just wanted to add in addition to all the information that you found in the board report tonight. One, the budget book is out. It's on our website. So if you go under departments, finance and operations, you'll see ACSD annual reports and budget books. You can find it there. We'll be covering that at depth on at the annual meeting on the 23rd. Brittany is coming back to present that and to answer questions, which is great. So that will be super helpful. We did meet last week with Governor Douglas, our moderator, and we kind of talked through how this is going to work virtually. I think we've got a handle on it, and we'll be prepared to both present the budget at the public information hearing portion, which is the only portion we have this year as we've moved the other articles over to Australian ballot. In addition, we'll be hearing from our board candidates for vote on town meeting day. I wanted to actually give an update. It was good to hear comments about MUMS and what's happening at MUMS. An update just in terms of the work that we're doing as we get closer. Currently, Andrew Conforti, the interim principal, really and the entire MUMS staff have been engaged over the last probably 3 weeks and really kind of digging into the framework that was created when the board heard the 3.0 version back in, I think it was October. I think we're probably moving into a 4.0 at this point. They are looking at instructional time. They're looking at a transition. They're really considering, I think in a lot of ways, what are the needs, both long-term in terms of the model, but also really thinking about a strong transition next year, just given kind of where we are. So they're looking at all those pieces, and I think are very close to this week, kind of making some final decisions around that structure that will work for everyone and really support kids. So it's been exciting to be a part of that process and look for more information coming. One thing kind of related to that work, and I think work in general in terms of COVID recovery that I wanted to share here, there was an update in the board report on Esser Funds. These are federal funds that are coming to schools throughout the country. We're receiving 2 different Esser Funds. One is kind of coming due soon, and another one is following. We'll have a couple years to spend those funds, and we're excited to be able to have additional funding to look at needs we might have next year. So this would be grant funding beyond what's currently in our budget, and it's coming at a really, really important time when we know as we start to think about what kinds of structures we need to have in place for next year, we will have some flexibility in terms of looking at getting support from places like the Stern Center for Literacy and other supports to make sure that we have as much in place for students as possible to kind of get back with, as I mentioned in our last meeting with learning loss and the pandemic and just the challenges that we faced over the last year. So that was really positive news. This past week, we also met the ACSD student equity team met. So it's a team that I work with both Justin Campbell and Andrew Conforti. They each have teams at MOMS and MUHS. These are student teams that are leading equity work in our district. The structure is such that we're meeting monthly as a district team, which will help to guide the work that is happening, across all schools. Additionally, those student representatives that come to the monthly district equity team meeting are going back to their buildings, working with either the social justice group at MOMS or SCORE, which is the group that is active at the high school to look at ways to make changes in the culture of their schools and take action. So I'm really excited that we've got that moving now and the work is beginning. So that's my update for tonight.
Oh, go ahead.
Chip.
Can we get a printed copy at the office of the budget book, or what's the?
We can, yeah. Just request one from Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Peter C.
Peter, do you have any idea how much Esser money from Esser 1 you probably do know, but how about Esser 2? And do you have a sort of a process in place if all of a sudden President Biden is successful in putting through his $1.9 trillion package, and that's going to end up with more money, I assume, coming to schools as well. And I was curious to know amounts, but also sort of like the process for how to decide how to spend it.
Right. So the first Esser amount is about 400,000. We're not sure about the second Esser amount yet. I believe we expect that to be larger than the first. So we're looking. It's a conversation that we're actually having regionally and statewide. We feel like there's a lot of power in leveraging a regional approach and thinking about what are the needs of schools, for example, in Addison County as a regional group, or looking at the larger CVSA group that we're part of. In terms of kind of like how we spend that money, we want to make sure that we're building a design and that we're not just layering things on top of our current system. So we're actually in that process right now of kind of determining both individually, locally, what does recovery look like and what are our needs. And what we're talking about in terms of spending those funds is probably some of it's going to be personnel and training, but we also have to design the space for that to happen. And so that's kind of our thinking right now, and what we want to have in place as we get towards the summer, and we are working under the expectation that we will be back fully in person. We don't, we were talking about this today. It's so hard to predict what September is going to look like. And I think, as we look at how the vaccinations are going in Vermont and where we're going to be as a state at that point, my own feeling based on what I'm reading and seeing and talking to other colleagues is that we're still going to have some limitations in terms of kind of COVID guidelines, so to speak. But based on what we've heard from the governor and everything else that we're reading, we feel like there's a very strong likelihood that the health and safety guidance, which keeps our secondary schools right now remote for half the week, our hybrid model, we feel like that the likelihood is that will change and we'll have all students back. So it's somewhat challenging to be designing in this space where we don't quite know what the space is yet. But we do know that we've got significant funding to be able to really kind of intensely remediate in ways that I think will be really powerful, both to students in the near term, and I also think in terms of changes to our system that will be impactful long-term. You know, so we don't want to just use this funding. Great, like we push all this support in for a year or two, and then it just recedes away, and we're kind of, you know, we're not like learning through that and taking that forward. So that also is part of what we're thinking about.
Yeah, and of course the challenge is that it's one-time funding.
One-time funding. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions for Peter's report? Jory.
Peter, just curious if the district equity work involves reps from elementary schools or if it's just the middle and high school as of now?
Right now it's the middle and high school, and we have some different teams at different schools, and some of that work is happening in like student council, for example, in our elementary schools. It's something that we're kind of like moving towards to think about what does that connection look like at the elementary level, and how does that kind of connect to the district level, and then obviously at the building level too. And all of this is going to be intertwined as we, you know, as we move from this reactive period into building forward with our strategic plan for equity.
Any other questions? Okay. Next up, Peter.
Is Dana Peterson here to present the HCC budget?
I am, Peter. Shall I share my screen? And I think I have screen sharing privileges. I'll put a brief presentation on and then open it up to questions. How's that sound?
Great.
Okay. Can everybody see my first presentation slide?
Yep, you're all set.
All righty. Thanks very much. Okay, so good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dana Peterson. I'm the Director Superintendent at the Patricia A. Hannaford Regional Technical School District. And tonight's presentation will look at our overall budget and provide a comparison of FY20 actuals and FY21 adopted budget, along with the FY22 proposed. First thing in our overview is that we are proposing a budget of $3,829,301 compared to the adopted budget of FY21, $3,864,000. We're down $35,450, or just shy of 1%. In our audit and our fund balance, which we just received in time for our last Hannaford Career Center board meeting, we had approximately $100,000 in fund balance, and we're recommending an allocation for the FY22 and beyond, with $56,000 for future tax abatement, $24,000 to our building equipment and reserve fund, and $20,000 to our health reserve account. We looked at the budget both by function and object, and here some of the things that are important to point out are that approximately 51% final, the rightmost column, percent of the budget, 51.4% of our budget is spent on direct instruction. Co-op is 1.6, we have intercurricular at just under 1%, guidance and health services just under 4, information technology just over 4, Board of Ed and Treasurer, 5.5. General administration and business office combined reached about 14%. Debt service is 3.5. Facilities is 14.5. And our student transportation is 0.7, 0.75%. If we look at it from an object perspective, we see that salaries and benefits combined reach about 78% of our total budget expenses. That shouldn't be news to anyone. Oftentimes, most districts expend between 75 and 80% of their budgets on salaries and benefits, and that's very true for the Career Center as well. Other areas combine to make up the additional 22%, but you can see that none of those areas are very large, approximately 1.5% to 2%, with the exception of supplies and utilities, which are at approximately 4.5% and 3%. Oop, and I forgot debt service. That's our bond on our North Campus work, which will be sunsetting in 2 years. On the revenue front, we are expecting to transfer from the FY20 fund balance $28,500. We're looking at a transportation reimbursement of about $12,000. Interest income is a whopping $500. We have technical center. Oh, that shouldn't be transportation. That should be rental reimbursement, $11,000. Perkins grant of about 105. Salary support reimbursements, 123,000 for various positions that we hold. And then total budget revenues this year are at approximately 280,500, which is a little over 29,000 from this current year. State-based tuition payment is going to be approximately 1.2 million. Tuition assistance grant at 476,000, and the total tuition assistance is 1.94 million. That leaves the estimated tuition assessment to be 1,886,142, which is $14,630, almost $1,700 below what last year's pupil cost was. And I'll stop for just a moment to just remind people, and for those who may not know, that the estimated tuition assessments we are estimating those this year and assessing them for next year. And all of the tuition costs are assessed on a 6-semester trailing average. And so the payment next year will be for students who aren't currently at the Career Center. They'll be for students from the last 3 years over a 6-semester average. Our state payment will be 1.2 million, as I mentioned from the previous slide. That adds approximately $9,000, $9,200, based on our FTEs. Good news is that our FTE count is up by approximately 5.5 students from last year, and we're very pleased with that. We probably would have had an increase if it hadn't been for COVID in terms of the number of students that we had originally registered for Career Center classes before things ended up needing to change. The total cost per FTE, as you can see there on the final line at the bottom, is $23,827. That is down almost $1,700, as I said. Difference is approximately $8 in the state payment that has increased over last year. So down $1,676 for FY22 per student. Some of the cost drivers for FY22 are $100,000. That is not an additional $100,000, but that is what we are expecting our costs to be. That's been revised down from the 120. But if you remember in one of my previous slides, we are going to be transferring $20,000 from the unrestricted fund balance for 2020 into our health reserve account. So basically, it's the same level of funding for our health insurance coverage, additional for the HRA and HSAs for FY22. What we absorbed was a $50,000 increase in health insurance premiums. It was approximately just shy of 10%. Our construction technology program is due to go to level 2 because of the number of students that we are currently serving and those we project to be serving next year based on the availability of students in the program that have expressed interest in continuing. Our BERF will once again carry a $25,000 transfer so that we can build up our equipment, building equipment and reserve fund, which was getting dangerously low, and we have a number of projects that we do need to attend to. And then our contingency and legal fund, both of these funds, the BERF and the legal contingency fund, were strongly encouraged to fund at the levels that we're currently doing based on both our auditors' recommendation and our legal counsel's requests. So overall, the good news is that within our current budget, we have absorbed $55,000 in net increases in those areas as we go into FY22. So we're able to reduce the budget and absorb that $55,000, which is no small feat. But I want to give credit to everyone at the Career Center who helped us to find those savings. A little bit of a program overview and some details. The pre-technical programs were at all-time highs last year. And that's something that we were very proud of, and we were very pleased to be able to offer that to all of our partner schools. And they saw a drop due to COVID, and we're expecting to see a resurgence, and we're working on scheduling currently to see how that plays out. Unlike the general education programs, decisions for CTE programs are based on industry demand and AOE approval. A few other points on center overview and details. Based on historical data from AOE, the Hannaford Career Center is in the middle of the 3 independent career centers in terms of overall budget spending between Bennington, which is the Southwest Career Development Center, and Springfield, which is the River Valley Technical Center. And to give you just one example that I was able to get from one of our partners, for comparison purposes, Southwest this year has a warrant budget of $4,039,000 for FY22, and their per pupil or per FTE cost is $22,307. Last year, the Career Center served the second largest number of students statewide after North Country Career Center. We served 399 students in both pre-tech and technical programs. We're very proud of that accomplishment as well for a relatively small center. So questions? I'll stop sharing my screen and, well, actually I'll leave it on for a moment in case anybody wants me to go back to a previous slide, but I'll open it up for any questions you might have.
And it might be hard for people to see for Mary to see the other board members. Maybe unshare, and then you can just quickly reshare.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Appreciate it. One quick question. Could you talk a little bit about the cost basis for this current configuration? How much room do you have to grow with this cost basis? So if you were to add another 15 students, could this cost basis support it? Or would we see increasing costs?
No.
And how far could you go on that?
That's difficult to answer, Mary, because it's program specific. Some programs we could absorb. We could absorb 15 students easily across the Career Center, but there are some programs that we currently have that are oversubscribed, so we couldn't absorb anybody. But there are other programs where we could certainly take in five or six more students. And if we carried that across, that's on the technical program level. On the pre-tech program level, once again, we run 4 programs. Last year, they were near capacity, so we didn't have a whole lot of extra capacity. But I would say we can probably take 15, maybe 20% additional capacity in those programs for next year. And we're in the process of accepting applications right now, but we do have some space. When I first arrived at the Career Center, the space was as great as 30%. In some programs, it was actually 50% or more. And that has decreased over time. The problem with the funding mechanism and the calculation is that it's on a trailing average. So current bodies in the room or in the programs are what we still have some capacity for. But for example, construction technology is full. Our automotive technology program is full. Our design and illustration program is full. Medical professions is near capacity. I think we have capacity for 1 or 2 more students. But then in other programs, we can easily, for example, engineering or computer science, we could probably take in 5, 6 more students, depending on, applications next year.
Peter C?
2 very quick questions. Could you remind us what the co-op program is, and how old is the construction technology program at this point?
Okay, so let me take the second question first, because that's quicker to answer. The construction technology program is now in its 2nd year.
Okay.
And we were planning for it to be a level 1, level 2 program this year, but we had a heavy group of seniors. They graduated, and we were only going to have approximately 3 students eligible to do a 2nd year of the programming, and we didn't feel that was viable. So we waited, and this year we now have a small number of, I think we have 11, but we have a small number of seniors currently, but we have 11 juniors who are eligible to return, and most of those have expressed interest. So that program will be viable for level 2. And then we'll take students in, both juniors and seniors, next year for level 1 programming. But it's great to see the number of juniors being interested. That really helps sustain the program. So the second question was, the first question was the co-op program. Our co-op program is our program that places students in with industry partners, and they apply, and they have to have, it's almost like a pre-apprenticeship. They apply, and then they actually get placed in various businesses around Addison County. And that can be, it doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to programming, but it often is. So for example, many of our students that in the automotive and diesel programs might go to, say, County Tire, for example, and do work there. Particularly during the high seasons for changeover tire changes and other things. And they actually get to work on a lot of the mechanical learning that they are doing in the shop. And we can place students in a variety of creative programs. So we had one student who was working on airplane engines, part of the automotive program, out at the county airport. And that was a really successful, that was a 2-year placement, because this student actually came to us as a sophomore and had an extra semester. So one of his semesters was entirely placed in the industry, working on airplane engines, which was really quite a tribute for him. And we ended up having to ask for a waiver because technically Career Center program students can't work on water vehicles, at least on the water, and they can't go and fly in planes. So we had to get clarification from our insurer to make sure that he was going to be staying on the ground, and then we had to get sign off from the students. So we can do quite a few creative things. Many of our students in the medical professions and early childhood programs are actually placed in rotations and doing work with early childhood or in the hospital or in senior living facilities. So they're actually getting on-the-job training, and they will also qualify for advanced certificates such as a licensed nursing assistant and the child development assistant and a few other industry recognized credentials. So we're very pleased with those partnerships that we have.
Right. Any other questions for Dana? Victoria.
Yeah, Dana, I'm just curious about when you say like the new construction program is oversubscribed. Do you have an idea? Well, one, would the facility allow to have a second section, so to speak? And do you have planning for, if you're oversubscribed by 15, do you have the ability to then create another section?
So let me dissect that a little bit for you, Victoria. The first part is that we currently only run an afternoon program. Next year, so it's in the same space, but we could currently serve twice as many students at different levels. We have no problem doing that, and that would also expand our capacity because the students that we have this year would be in level 2, and then we could take a comparable number for next year. And we think that we have that capacity. We would have to have almost a third full section to justify expanding it to that point. And that would be a question that we would have to look at with respect to our North Campus facility and some plans that we have to do some renovation out there and whether we could do that. So we can take on additional capacity. We might shift, for example, one of our pre-tech mechanical science programs that is currently in a fairly large space that was used for construction tech in the past, and that could be rehabilitated to do that. So with some of our strategic shifting of locations of programs, we could accommodate more students if the need should arise.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? All right, great. Thank you, Dana, very much for taking the time. We appreciate the information.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to come, and I appreciate always being invited back. So take care, and I'll sign off. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next up in my report, I would like to introduce Laura Lavaca, who was just on my screen. There we go. There you are. So Laura, as you know, was hired this year as our food service director. She's made a huge impact on so many parts of our food service program. It's been really exciting. I see Fernanda nodding her head. She's spent a lot of time in Salisbury helping out Fernanda and everyone else there, and all over the district. I asked her to come tonight just to give an update on the work that she's done this year and give you a little sense of the work that we're doing as we go into next year. And as you all know, next year, our 3 Middlebury schools are going to be transitioning to full ACSD food service programs, which is really exciting. It's something we've talked about for over a decade. The day is almost here, and Laura will be giving us just kind of an overview of, as I said, what she's done and where we're headed. Laura.
All right. Hopefully I can share my screen. I'm excited to be here and share all the work that we've been doing. And there we go. Just to start off, I thought it would be fun to look at these numbers. So far this year, we've served 41,182 breakfasts and 53,239 lunches. Those numbers include remote meals, meal kits, and in-school meals. A big part of what we've been doing this year, it'd be hard not to talk about, is our meal kits. And so Addison Central collaborated with Mount Abe and Addison Northwest school districts to provide convenient, respectful, and safe access to vacation meal kits. We're gearing up for our 3rd distribution with, again, over 1,000 kits signed up for in Addison County, 500 of which are coming from Addison Central School District. So just to give you an idea, that's 6,000 lunches and 6,000 breakfasts being distributed on Friday, just from Addison Central. You know, the meal kit assembly has been a great way for us to engage our community in our work. None of this would have been possible without the help of Erica Garner. She organized and mobilized an army of volunteers to help get the boxes assembled, packed, and delivered to families. And we had 25 volunteers in November, 50 in December, and we have over 70 signed up for this year. And we also had some students, including Kyle, help out in December. The number of meal kit signups really speaks volumes about how appreciated they are and how necessary they are. And these quotes from our February, if you can see them, from our February sign up really tells the story of how much folks have needed it. We're also in the beginning of March, first week of March, we're planning on sending home weekend meals from Salisbury. And if we can, we're going to extend that to other schools. We're also in the process of applying to serve supper at Salisbury. Once the waiver lifts, because right now we're operating under a waiver for area eligibility, Salisbury will be a community that could continue suppers and after school meals for programming there, pardon me. There's a lot going on both in our state and in our nation, trying to get universal meals to extend beyond this year as well. We're serving meals in a variety of ways to accommodate each school's unique needs. Some are eating in the cafeteria, some are eating in their classrooms, some are coming to the cafeteria, picking up their meals and taking to the classrooms, and we're also providing meals for kids who are learning remotely. The menu is where it all happens. This is where we communicate with families, collaborate and celebrate units of study, and market healthy and local school meals. We work collaboratively with all the school managers to create the menu. You know, most of the schools are serving pretty much the same menu. It's just, we've just organized it in a repeating cycle. And that helps us to manage consistent, you know, food cost and quality. Schools then each have an opportunity to make changes to their menu to take into consideration student preference, special events, inventory. You know, school menus are a great way to connect with the school nutrition and student learning. There is a lot going on with Farm to School behind the scenes. We do purchase from a variety of local producers, cheese, milk, eggs, yogurt, maple syrup, beef, and produce. We'll continue to make strides towards dedicating a greater part of our food budget towards local purchases. And in the spring, we'll work on some more formalized contracts and bid process to make that happen more regularly next year. There's also, you know, Bridport Central School has a Farm to School team, and they also just received a mini grant of $2,000. They're using that mini grant for a snack program and highlighting local product whenever possible. Bria Walker and Elizabeth Burrows are teaming up in the classroom, talking to kids about food miles and food sourcing and also nutrition and healthy meals. Professional development is also a big part of what we do. We are required to have a certain number of hours of development. And so this year we've taken advantage of a lot of the online resources that are available to us. Anyone who did not have a food safety training previously, just in January, did do some food safety training. Other folks did other kinds of trainings. We're looking forward to hopefully being able to gather as a group next year with Addison Central and Mount Abe districts to do some more collaborative training, and also are hoping to do some mentoring among the different food service managers across the county. This year, with the help of Brittany, we received $95,000 worth of grant funding, and it helped us purchase quite a few things, including some packaging equipment, a mobile freezer refrigerator unit, dishwashers, food processing equipment, and this van, which by the way I love because I drive it everywhere and it's full of stuff. lastly, we're gearing up for next year and for summer. So this summer, Mary Johnson Children's Center is taking a step back from pre-production at Mary Hogan, and we'll manage that summer program there. So we'll be able to serve the kids who are at programming at Mary Hogan, and there's going to be some at MUMS. And we are looking at sites across the district for summer meal distribution, perhaps at Branbury State Park, and other places where kids would tend to gather, and camps and Shoreham and Bridport are on the list as well. We're also just beginning to really look at next year and what staffing might look like, and looking at some key indicators to decide how many and where we need folks to be. Menu development for the high school and the middle school will be a little different than the elementary school. And that's all I have. Any questions?
This was great. And I know in so many discussions, the board, we have been so excited to have you on the team to be leading this charge. You know, food is such an important component of a child's educational experience, and preparing them to be ready to learn, as well as the story that we all have of that meal that we would get at school that we would wonder what it was. And to limit those stories when we live in a state like Vermont, where we have the ability to do so, is just an outstanding opportunity. And so we thank you so much for the passion and the commitment that you're bringing to this work. And you know, during the pandemic especially, making sure that we were able to provide and continue to provide assistance to our families, to ensure that they have a safe and healthy opportunity for their kids to eat, is just beyond. And so thank you so much for your commitment and the work that you're doing here. Any questions? Chip.
I have one comment. I think it was last fall before we went to full time. Somebody come up to me and said, "I can't believe all these people giving away free, cold boxes that are leaving them out on the street." And I said, "They're not for free. Those are for whatever." So, I mean, I think the world changed, obviously, and people figured it out. But there was that sense of, what are all these things doing out there? So I congratulate you on your organization. I've only heard good things about it. So
thank you.
Peter C.?
I think that this is a good reminder for everybody on the board. When we talk about being a unified district, we're often dealing with difficult issues, but really this is a good reminder that this is the benefit of being able to put in a system with leadership to really take what we're doing in food management to the next level. And yeah, really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Laura? Well, thank you again, Laura. Oh, wait, Victoria.
I was just going to ask, what's the favorite meal?
Oh, probably pizza. I hate to say it. Although breakfast for lunch is a huge hit.
Breakfast for lunch.
Thank you for your work.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Peter, I think that's it for report of the superintendent, correct? Great. On to report of the board. We have an action item, I believe, with regards to a fund proposal.
Yeah, and I'll just give a runway here to Jen. So the Mcdonald Fund is a trust fund that was set up. I don't remember when it started up, long ago. It was part of ID4, and when we unified, it's in the ACSD Articles of Agreement. Each year, the budget comes before the board and is approved by the board. So that formerly was the ID4 board, and now it's the ACSD board.
Hi. So I came to you guys in the fall, asking for funding for some things that would help our outdoor play and outdoor classrooms, and you were generously approved it, and that was for about a little bit over $8,000. I actually don't think that we'll spend all of that money this year for a variety of reasons. But it's been a year with COVID, and so we are just adjusting, and would really like to ask for a second disbursement of $6,700, all of which would go to help enhance student programming fully in line with the McJilton mission. $2,700 would allow the 5th and 6th grade classrooms to engage in theater activities with Courageous Stage. They wouldn't be coming into the school, but it would be both synchronous and asynchronous online. They've created this model across the country with both artists and schools. So they're pretty excited, and they're working with the 5th grade teachers now. $2,800 for PE offerings, which are primarily to allow all of our students to go ice skating, which is a typical event. And we've just figured out that we can, how to do it with COVID safety at the Memorial Sports Center. And then the last is $1,000 to help provide meal kits for our pilot project with the Middlebury College Group Nutrition Outreach and Mentoring. So each month we do Cooking with NOM, which is the group, and they provide meal kits to people who sign up, and we cook a meal together on Zoom, and kids are basically getting cooking lessons. And they've funded October, November, December, and January. And it's a pilot, so we're still working out funding, and it feels like McJilton would be an appropriate way to also contribute to this project. So the $6,700 this time. In total for the year, the requests have been $13,750, which is far less than a typical year, but it was fitting in for this year. And it was also part of Brittany and I had talked in the spring about not requesting a disbursement this past year from McJilton because of COVID and not knowing how much money and what the money would be used for. And there already was about $18,000 in the fund that had not been spent from past years. So we're basically just using past funding through this request.
Chip?
There's no requirement that we have to take out any particular amount every year. Is that true?
So I could be wrong because I'm new to this. I think that there isn't a requirement that a particular amount comes out, but if we want to request the amount, that we would request it around now. And I think typically the principal creates a request for the following year around now. And that's something that I need to work with Peter on, whether that timing continues to make sense with COVID or not.
Well, part of my question, I guess, is that, assuming COVID resolves in a way that we can then resume the Keewaydin and the class trips, then we would probably revert to a withdrawal every year of similar amounts that we did before. Is that true, Peter?
Yeah, and it has been mostly historically a yearly process. In terms of how much we have to spend, there isn't a set amount, but we've tried to leave the principal, or we've tried to sustain the fund, and so the average disbursement, just off the top of my head, I feel like historically it's been in like the $30,000 range.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Need a motion to approve this? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I think we need a motion to approve. And Peter, just to confirm, the document that's in board pack, that, I want to make sure I'm looking at the right one, or that we, at least we have the right one in there. It says Mcdonald Fund Board Memo, is that, and then the
Yeah,
okay. And which one is supposed to?
it's just approving the 2021 budget revision. A motion to approve the 2021. This is for now in the budget. The FY22 is, as Kathy mentioned here, will likely be proposed in the summer.
Perfect. So I need a motion then to approve the Mcdonald Memorial Fund 2021 proposed budget.
Make that motion.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Suzanne, great. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So moved. Perfect. Jen, thanks very much for that presentation. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a quick question that's wasn't germane to the motion, and this is probably for Lorraine, or anybody who goes back far enough. I was kind of blown away that this has $818,000 in it, and I'm trying to remember what it was originally, because I remember this from 25 years ago, probably. Lorraine, do you know what it was the last time you knew?
It was a really, really small, I can't remember the exact amount, Peter, but it was really tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been very
It's done well.
prudent over the year.
Yeah, I think
they use it at all.
it originally was a family had given a gift in memorial, you know, after someone passed away to set aside. And I think it was, my recollection is that it was used for a number of years, little bits, and then it was sort of forgotten about, and I think was able to grow. And then, you know, people are able to contribute, and whether or not there've been contributions along the way, I don't know. But I think the key was that it sort of got ignored for a little while. And
I believe there was also historically some kind of settlement, maybe, that added funds to it. Does that sound familiar?
No.
No? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
We'll take it.
Yeah, it's doing well.
We'll find out who
healthy.
manages that portfolio. All right. Next on the agenda is committee updates. So we'll just do a general roll call of committee chairs and get any update that you may or may not have. Let's start with finance, Chip.
We have not met. We've not had anything other than we've discussed here.
Thank you. Mary G?
Yes, our policy committee has pretty busy drafting or taking model policies from the Vermont School Board, and we'll be presenting them in the next, probably early March. We didn't want to overload the agenda for the last couple weeks, but it will be on instructional materials, homeless students and homeschool students, and as well as security cameras and surveillances. And our next project will be looking at responding to public comment. That was a request from some constituents, and we think it's probably a really good idea. And we've had some suggestions, as Mary Noble mentioned, from other constituents, and we'll be talking about those in the next committee meeting. So we're busy. Thank you.
Peter C?
So negotiations met today for the first time in a while, and sort of talk about strategy and goals. We're about to reach out to our partners in the unions and get the whole process of negotiations underway.
Great. Thank you. Victoria?
we're paused. Enjoying the pause.
All right. Thank you. And Amy?
And because the FMP is paused, then we need to regroup and figure out what's next for our committee, and we're meeting next week. We're waiting till after today's meeting to see if there's anything regarding the Ripton secession that we would be involved in or not. So we'll report next time.
Great. Thank you all very much. I think that's everyone, right? And next on the agenda is the Ripton secession from ACSD. We put this on the agenda for two components. One is to start off and understand how the district will be providing data sets for town constituents to be able to review pieces of information, different components of what it means to secede, et cetera, so that folks can be as informed as possible when they go to make their vote. And so Peter's going to talk a little bit about that from a financial perspective, the data that is being collected and how we're thinking about getting that information out there. And then the second half of it is, you know, we get folks who have reached out and has asked that now that we're kind of in this next phase of this process, has the board's position changed with regards to the statement that we made previously? And so I just wanted to give folks the opportunity to comment or to provide any additional color now that Ripton as a town has voted to move forward with the secession process. Has there been any change or alteration in any opinions of what that means for the district as a board member? So why don't we start off with Peter, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. So we are working, and Brittany is working on a document to share with all of our communities. We've been contacted by a number of people, some town managers asking what is ACSD doing to provide information to towns to understand what it means. I think mostly from a financial standpoint, if Ripton ends up seceding, if our town votes to secede, what's the impact on our town financially? So we're looking at this, in two ways. And the first way we're looking at this is what happens if everything stays the same and we go from 7 elementary schools to 6 elementary schools, what's the impact? So that's the first scenario that she's looking at. And she's looking at, to the best of her abilities, trying to pull out, staffing. It's a little bit challenging just because it's hard to know with some of the centralized costs what the impact would be to ACSD. So I think she's kind of trying to do that conservatively. And then she's looking at a second scenario, looking at what is the financial implications if Ripton is closed, if those students stay in the district and those students attend other schools, which is where the board left off with the facilities master plan. What then is the financial impact to communities if those students stay within ACSD? So again, we don't know what the future holds. We don't know where this process will eventually lead and what the final outcome will be. So we felt that given the realities of where we are today, that it made sense to provide people with those two scenarios and figure out, as I said, to the best of our abilities, what we think the impact would be. And of course, we'll state in that these are estimates. Things change, right? But, giving people at least a sense of what it means.
Great. And Peter, could you talk a little bit about any discussions as to how the district's going to get that information out there?
Our plan is to get it done by the end of this week and put it on our website, and then also share through other avenues. We like to think everyone comes to our website, but we found that that's not true. So sharing it as far as, sharing it with towns, front porch forum, things like that.
Great. Chip?
I've had a number of questions from people of my age group, actually, around town asking these questions, those that I know, and I couldn't answer them. And one of the questions, I think, if in fact Ripton does get the vote to secede, and thus those students are then I guess, tuitioned, those students that are secondary level are tuitioned to our district. What does that do to our equalized pupil number?
So
Are those students considered in the supervisory union that they are then with? Or, I mean, is that
they're
for us in that way?
Yeah, they're counted in the district they're coming from if they're tuitioning. We receive the revenue. Excuse me. We receive the revenue, but we don't count them as equalized pupils.
Which definitely hurts us as a district relative to at least the way the budgeting and financial situation is with the state, correct?
It doesn't necessarily hurt us. You know, there's an allowable tuition, and this comes before the board every January where you.
I know that, but
Yeah. So that number, you know, 18, 19,000, whatever it is close to, you know, if it's counted as equalized pupil. I mean, there is a subtlety there, which, again, is interesting because there's different weighting for secondary students as opposed to elementary students. So the weighting does have a slight impact on a student, like how much a student brings with equalized pupil. You know, an elementary student is 1.0, and a secondary or a high school student at least is maybe 1.3. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. So that may have a slight change.
I think you should try to look at that in a way that, because those are questions that people, even those that are not sophisticated about the funding system, that equalized pupil number is out there. And I have two other questions while we're at it. The assumption would be if Ripton succeeds and gets the votes to do that they will keep their sixth graders. I'm making that assumption.
Yeah,
I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
That's my
Third
understanding.
question, and the third question really comes into the International Baccalaureate curriculum and how disruptive potentially, and all this I think goes into whether we have a board statement about the pluses and minuses and what the board feels would be best. How does, you know, the IB curriculum and those students who are coming in, I would expect most of the secondary students with tuition here. There's not a lot of other places they can go that are certainly not as convenient as here. And how that would potentially disrupt our IB curriculum, having a certain number of kids coming in without any pre-IB sort of culture.
Right. I mean, I think anytime you have, when you're working in a pre-K through 12, you know, connected, cohesive curriculum, and students, you know, and you're mapping that out, and there's a certain kind of, you know, a strong connection between grade levels and in terms of the design of the curriculum, and you change that and you have a totally different system coming in, you know, some students will still be successful with that shift, but it's, you know, I think it's probably more ideal to have one connected pre-K through 12 system as opposed to two separate ones. In terms of IB and the impact, you know, I think IB really is best practice in education. And so, you know, I mean, I believe, and I think at ACSD we believe and are seeing the impact of it. You know, I think especially we're seeing it at the PYP level. So you know, I think that is an impact, and I think that's, again, it's kind of a judgment call, I think, for people in terms of what they believe and feel is important. And it's one of the considerations I'm sure that people are thinking about as they discuss this.
That's part of my reasons for asking it, because a board's position, I suppose it could be different than what we said before the Ripton vote, or the Weybridge vote, but I suppose it could be also very different. So, but those issues are important to me, actually, so that's why I asked them.
Peter C?
Just a couple of unrelated things. First of all, the secondary students are counted at 1.13 as opposed to 1.3.
I got the 3 right.
Yeah. And then just a reminder that we get the tuition revenue, which you did mention, Peter, but I just wanted to reemphasize that from the students. And the other thing I was going to mention is that, we already do have a situation where we have students that come to the middle school, mainly from Rochester, which doesn't operate a middle school or high school, who are not part of that program, as well as some Hancock kids that go to Rochester as well. But I guess I think that I would like to know, as we sort of discuss this issue, as to whether we're going to take a position at this point, or that's any different than what we already have taken, is, some folks from Ripton have put out there that they have been told that this really is a negligible financial impact. I don't know that to be a hard fact. I guess I'd like a little more knowledge on that. If you can at least categorize it as it's a huge impact, it's a negligible impact, and I think that's something that a lot of townspeople will vote. It's the pocketbook, and if this is going to make a significant impact on tax rates or not at all, it'd be at least important to have a general idea.
I think it's going to fall pretty much, basically, I think it's all going to depend on what the board does in the future. So if you look at moving from 7 schools to 6 elementary schools, I think it's negligible, because before, given the scale of the budget and the scale of ACSD, it's not going to have a significant impact on the budget. So I think 7 to 6, it's negligible. I think if you look at the EQP of all those students in other ACSD schools, then that is somewhat of an impact. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of you right now to let you know what those are, but I think that's what we're going to find.
Jen?
Do you, Dr. Burrows, have a sense of the timing at this point? I feel like when I originally saw the petition, it was to secede as of June 30th, 2021. And is that still the timing, and is that the budget that you're looking at? And if so, my more immediate concern, and then the budgetary impact on considering.
Jen, we're losing you a little bit. Do you want to go off video?
I think I understood what she was asking. Yeah, I mean, my understanding of the process is that the state board would set the timeline, and I think, given that we will be hopefully passing, the budget on town meeting day, and moving forward with a budget that already has our full district within it, that if that does happen, if secession is approved in all towns, once the state board gets that and they convene, and you're talking about maybe May by the time the state board takes this up, April or May. I'm just guessing here. From what I understand, it would probably be more like FY23 as opposed to 22. Again, there are lots of unknowns about the timeline, and I don't have I don't have fact behind me here, but that's my read, because otherwise you're looking at having to reopen the ACSD budget in June or at some point, once the state board has gone through its work, to put a new budget. I would assume you'd have to put a new budget together minus the Ripton budget. So that just seems, that doesn't seem like that would come to pass to me.
And would it also be true that whatever SU got Ripton assigned to it, their budget would also change? Their approved budget would also change?
Well, and the services that they would be providing, they need to be hiring staff. I mean, it's complex. So I just think that would take time, and I believe the state board would take that into consideration in setting a timeline.
Other questions? Lorraine?
Yeah, Peter, I have a couple of questions. I had someone, in fact, reach out to me today asking me some questions about all of this, including financial things, which I couldn't answer. She did say she's planning on attending our annual meeting. I directed her to the website. I said, you might, some of your questions might be answered in our FAQs, but so I'm assuming we will have some detailed information to provide at the annual meeting for folks who I'm sure are going to be asking about this. That's my first question. And also I noticed today on Front Page Forum, which you mentioned earlier, using that to get out information, somebody had actually some questions on Front Page Forum about the Ripton secession questions. And I'm wondering if are people either like on the communications committee, or is anybody monitoring the local Front Page forums so that when questions like this arise, somebody can try to answer them, or instead of leaving them out there in limbo with their questions?
Do you want me to go on the first piece?
Yeah, any or all.
The second one was to the other committee, so that's why I was. So I think in terms of the annual meeting, Governor Douglas said he would be ready to speak to where the information can be found. We talked through this, and because it's a district meeting and this vote is a town vote, that would not be part of the agenda. Not that it won't, that a question can't be responded to, but that this conversation is a town conversation about seceding from the district. It's not the district holding that topic. We're providing the information. We're providing that financial information so that people understand what the implications are, but that likely is a conversation that's going to be, or definitely will be, happening at town meetings, because it's a town decision, not a district decision.
Okay.
But to Lorraine's point, like where there be information that was shared?
Well, yeah, we're planning to provide that. We're talking about financial information, right?
Right, like for example, how it would impact, we were talking about earlier, how it would impact somebody's taxes, say in Middlebury.
Yeah, that's what we're working on. I don't, in terms of the tax implications for each town, I'm not sure we're gonna, that's hard to figure out into the future just because there's so many fluctuations. I think what we're planning on preparing, and again, this can be an iterative process, so we don't have to be, if we share this information and there's more information that people need or questions come up, we can revise it and adjust it. But we were starting out with the overall cost and impact to the district, and probably looking at the district tax rate, not looking at what's going to happen potentially to CLA and Salisbury next year, or going to that level of detail. But yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier, that we're working on completing by the end of this week.
Okay, well, I mean, I think this person, for example, was wondering, for example, might vote not to allow Ripton to secede if it was going to negatively impact Middlebury's tax rate or, you know, something like that. And I'm assuming other towns, so we won't be able to give them that kind of information on a local level.
I mean, I think they'll be able to draw from at least from the district tax rate,
Okay.
draw some kinds of comparisons, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Lorraine.
Another question, I just wondered about if anybody's monitoring these front page forum questions that are arising. Did anybody else see the Middlebury one tonight?
I didn't see it tonight.
I mean, one of the things that they asked could be answered on the FAQs because he was asking about the teacher question, you know, if they leave, how the teachers would be treated. But there were some other questions he had as well, which aren't on the FAQ. And so I didn't know if anybody was actually looking at those so they could try to reach out to people who are posting questions on the forum. Or if somebody, like if any board member, I mean, because like as a board member, I could say, you know, reach out to the administrators or reach out to the communication team or whatever, or go to our FAQ page, but I didn't know if somebody was actually paying attention to those to do that.
Oh, I think, Amy, that's something from a communication standpoint and the district, you know, because some of this information, to Lorraine's point, the district's pulling together and there's going to be those financial pieces that we'll want to have in place and making sure there's just some, like anything else, there's some common set of data that folks can have a trusted place to go to get questions answered. And where is that? And what is the process to do that? I think what might be helpful is if that board members were getting questions from our different connections that we have to submit those questions to both Amy and Peter so that at least we could, if we don't have them on the FAQ, update the FAQ with any pertinent, whoever has the information to answer that question, which you know, we'll have to figure out. But then at least we could update the FAQ to reflect those types of new inquiries.
Okay.
I just make a comment about timing. Don't you have, aren't we, I mean, those of us that have requested, quote, absentee ballots or ballots that come out, I presume that ballot includes all the ballots that we vote, whether it be school, town, or otherwise. And I think there's going to be a lot of early voting on some of this information way before we have the informational meetings or that comes out. So this becomes quite complicated. People are going to be voting on not much information, honestly. I think.
Yeah, I agree, Chip. I hadn't thought about that because I've put in for an early, you know, for an absentee ballot too.
I mean, this is exactly why we didn't meet before the meeting today, so that we can talk next week about, you know, how we help with information dissemination, including getting stuff to you all, but also, you know, Jen's got the whole front porch forum lineup ready to roll and such. I mean, I think, and that's separate from us taking a stand or having a position. This is just about information dissemination, and I think so. I think it's a reasonable thing for us to talk about as a committee.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments for Peter? Suzanne?
So it's not really well, maybe in a way it is a question, but it's not something that necessarily would maybe affect the way somebody votes. But when we unified, we had articles that needed to be passed by all of the towns as an entirety. And in those articles, it calls out how the board membership is built, around 13 members, and that it was based on a census. So if Ripton is successful in seceding with an E, not a U, then we'd also have to look at how do we go about readjusting the articles that we were unified under? And what does that then do to the board structure, board membership, et cetera? So that's another piece of the puzzle that may or may not be right up front, but it is something that would then have consequences further down the road.
Other comments or questions? Great. Oh, Peter C., sorry about that.
When you say, I just didn't know if we were moving on to another topic or if
Oh, no, we're still on the top. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as we said kind of when we started kicking this off, you know, we did as a board take a position of stronger together prior to the two towns going through the process of their secession votes. And at that time, we all talked about the things that were on our minds as we thought about what our position should be. And now we're at kind of stage 2 of this, in which one of the towns has successfully passed their own town request to secede, and now we're on the next phase of this. And so we're getting that same question again, given the change in data, where before we weren't sure what towns thought, now we know what one town thinks. How are we as a board thinking about this? And I'm not sure we need to, again, get to a point of consensus on this, but I do think it would help for us to talk a little bit about some of the concerns or things that we're thinking about. So as we put these FAQs together, as we start to gather information, as we get out a good set of facts, we have a good sense of what those things are that we're hearing people asking us, or that our own concerns might be as we noodle through this challenge. So I just wanted to take a few moments as a board to kind of talk a little bit about that and see if, based upon the things that you're hearing or your own questions, how we should be thinking about the secession vote moving forward. So any initial thoughts or comment? Peter C.
So I guess I'll just sort of kick things off. Yeah, obviously, like everybody else, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think a lot of voters out there are sort of stuck not knowing what to do because there's not a lot of factual information out there, and there's just simply a lot of stuff that we don't know the answer to. And so I in a way assume that a lot of folks might be looking to the board for, you know, some sort of, I don't know, signal or some sort of point of view here. And I've been thinking about our, you know, do we have a responsibility to take a position? And I'm not quite sure I have an answer to that. I think it probably would be helpful to people who don't necessarily know what to do on this. I think they'd probably be curious to know where does the board, at least the majority of the board, stand on it. So anyway, I just sort of throw that out there as something that we should think about and in this discussion right now.
Amy.
Let me take myself off video so I can actually be heard. So, right, obviously been thinking about it a lot. And I'm torn because I hear advocates say you wouldn't want to keep a town hostage, per se. Like, why would you want to, as someone who remained to be forced to stay? And having said that, I think our fundamental belief that we are stronger together and that we formed as a district 5 years ago, and we still envision that being the strongest unit because of the history together, because of Middlebury being the general nexus of our district, which also happens to be where, you know, many people work and go for recreation and shop, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm of, you know, I think my fundamental belief that we're stronger together hasn't changed. And I'll also say, you know, I received a call from someone who is considering buying property in Ripton, who was very concerned that there was not going to be, that their kid would not be in an IB, or that there was uncertainty about it being in the district. They really wanted that guarantee. And I have a feeling they turned down or didn't end up making the offer they were going to make. And I actually talked to another prospective, you know, someone who hasn't quite gotten that far in the search, but so that's two people in the last week who are really hesitating about buying property in Ripton because there's no guarantee that they're part of the unified district. And I don't think our fundamental belief that it's better for kids has changed either. So I wouldn't necessarily advocate changing our statement. And I don't think we need to be going out and campaigning. I think making sure people get the right information is, you know, appropriate. But I really, yeah, I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Chip?
Yeah, Amy, you said exactly what I was going to say. And I've been bouncing back and forth totally on this right along. And I hear lots of sort of Middlebury folks, not lots, but I mean, enough of them so they're in my mind saying, well, let them go. They've been, you know, they're going to be hostage here. They're not going to be happy no matter what happens. But on the other side, we came into this whole thing with whether it's the facilities plan or whether it was unification or anything else, with students in mind. And I really, truly believe that the general district students, including Ripton, are better off together than they are apart. Even if they're not apart for their entire school time, they come in later as tuition students. But I have no reason to change that opinion after I keep sort of balancing off, and what, you know, you said it perfectly well, and I appreciate that since you've been in a tough position up there. But I have no reason to change what I had thought all along, that we're better in this together. Do I have some emotions in certain ways? Yes, I can't help it. Not at times thinking, God, sure would be easier maybe. But I don't think we have to campaign at all. I think it has to be a case that we just have to provide some data as best as we can, and people are going to have to decide.
Thanks, Chip. Other board members. Suzanne?
So I was part of the group that worked really hard to work on the articles, to reach out to all the community members about unification. And the reason, several of the reasons that we worked so hard was, you know, we really and truly felt deep in our hearts that at that point in time, the unification process was our one way to make sure we could maintain our schools. We had been told that without unification, we would probably lose our small schools grants. And in Bridport, that would have been, you know, kind of the nail in the coffin. And so that was a huge piece of this process, was we were doing everything we could to keep the schools open, because we knew that we could only do it if we were all in this together. And I too, with, you know, hearing Ripton's voice, I know I understand the importance to them of a community school. I've also read some of the misinformation that's out there and feel that we, as everyone has said, it may not be for us to campaign to keep us all together, but I think it is it's our right to put out as much information to make sure that people have the true facts about costs as best we can determine them, so that people can vote not just on feelings, but also on facts. But I really do believe that we are all better together. Watching this happen, as I said the other week, is just destroying me, knowing how hard everyone worked to unify us, to watch us get to this point where there's so many factions and so many challenges that it really hurts me as an individual. But I feel that as a board, if we can put out as many facts as we can to help people understand the issue without trying to like say, oh, we, sway them one way or the other, but give them the facts and allow them to vote based on the facts, I think is the best thing we can do.
Other comments from board members?
I'd like to hear other comments from board members, honestly.
Mary G?
I'd have to say I totally agree with Amy, Chip, and Suzanne. We went into this with the belief that it was best for students. The intention was we would keep the schools open, but the reality of the current situation is that it's not feasible to maintain all the buildings. But the principle and the values of the district staying together are still there, and so I support the board, coming, again, you don't need to campaign, but just say, we believe that this is best and this is what we are, we're putting out. So I appreciate Amy's wonderful, she's so eloquent about how she said this also. I totally support what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Victoria?
Yeah, I guess I don't really have much new or different to add. I appreciate hearing everyone's thoughts on this. And, I too feel sort of torn. I understand the sort of the mountain town viewpoint, and that they feel more distant from this district than some of the other schools. But like you all have shared, if asked what I think educationally is best for all students, I would say better together. But I understand where they're coming from and why there's so much passion behind this discussion.
Other comments? Lorraine?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote. I do believe, as everybody said, I do believe that we are stronger together. And I think personally, it's probably better for the Ripton kids to stay as part of our district. On the other hand, I respect the right of Ripton to disagree. And it's their students. They did vote to secede. So I'm not sure. I'm just being honest. I'm not sure how I'm gonna vote. I'm not sure.
That's okay. You're allowed. You're allowed not to be sure.
I'm just going to jump in with my wonky video here. I think Lorraine's feelings are sort of, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Unstable message. What Lorraine's saying about like your personal, like as a voter, what you feel is appropriate as a voter, and what as a board member, we feel like is sort of, what we feel is the most appropriate, for me personally, are a little bit at odds. And so that's why it's difficult maybe for some of us to take a stance as a board member.
And now we've lost you.
Because that might
back.
differ. I'll give up.
No, you're back. You're good.
Well, so I guess it's just, we're a little bit at odds with our different roles, perhaps. And so that's why maybe it's a little bit more complicated. I think as a board, our official stance, probably would stay the same. We're stronger together. Does that mean that as individuals, we can, maybe vote differently than that? And maybe we're asking for permission. Is that okay?
Peter C.
Yeah, I in my initial comments, I didn't really take a position here. And, I think this board is pretty unanimous in its belief that staying together is best for kids. Whether we're stronger together with a community that has voted strongly that they don't want to be with us, that they don't want to be part of this larger learning community, I'm not sure that statement necessarily holds true. We've got a lot of work to do, and I think we, not just in the facilities master plan, but just as a district, we've made incredible progress from the time we sort of joined together 5 years ago, and I think we want to keep that momentum going. So I too find myself torn between saying, how do we best move forward if at the same time, we have an unwilling partner, an unhappy partner. So that's just food for thought. I really appreciate hearing everybody's comments about, do we take a position or do we just put out the facts and it's not our job to campaign for it one way or the other. And I definitely can fall in that category, and I appreciate everybody else's input.
I was reading through, I think it was Front Porch Forum that I saw the comment, and there was the back and forth with regards to thinking about this from a perspective of the impact on kids. And I reflected to myself again that I do truly believe that it's best for the kids that we serve, including Ripton, to be part of ACSD. I believe that. And the thing that caught my eye in the comments that were going back and forth was someone referenced, this will be a good experiment for others to see, other districts and towns to see how it plays out. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I don't want to experiment with these kids. I don't think they signed up for that. And so that gave me pause in thinking about it. It just gave me pause, and I started to reflect on, what we should be doing as we go through this process. And I think I come down similarly with my colleagues in that we do have a responsibility as a board to ensure that there's a strong set of information that our towns can use as they make this decision. And I think we should get that information collected, have it be as exhaustive as possible, understanding the nuance to it all and the assumptions that have to be made. But that's where our efforts should go in doing everything that we can there. And we're obviously working as hard as everyone's working because we believe that ACSD is a great place and it's a great place for kids. And so, I'm not sure we have to change our position there. I think that's always going to be our position as a board. And now we can focus on getting that information out. Any other comments from board members? So I think at this point, it's safe to say, you know, the board moving forward is going to ensure that we are working with district leadership to get out the best information that we can so people are as informed as possible. If you do see questions being posed and we're not sure where the answers can be found, please forward those questions to Amy and to Peter so that we can start adding to the body of evidence or body of knowledge that we're trying to pull together as we work through this. Chip, you make a great point with regards to absentee ballots. And so I think that this is, you know, important work that we have to do as quickly as possible, given that. And then we'll continue on in the process. Any other thoughts on that? Great. And so I think that's it for agenda items other than the other item. Does anybody have any others for other? Victoria.
Yeah, there was a question from an attendee, and it reminded me that I had heard this question from others. And I thought, so Peter, maybe you could speak a little bit to, I know that the governor several weeks ago kind of lobbed out there that he wanted secondary school back, I can't remember what it was, April 1st or something, but then it seems there hasn't really been any information from him or the Department of Ed regarding details, and I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Sure, yeah. So we haven't received anything else on the interior as opposed to the exterior of the agency. We've asked about it a number of times, and what we've heard is that it was an aspirational goal as opposed to one that had data behind it and a plan and specific guidance to us in terms of here's how we're going to change the Healthy Start guidance to allow you to have students back. And that's what it keeps coming back to, is that guidance with 6 feet of separation required in grades 7 through 12 makes it impossible for us to bring all students back. And so until that changes, and again, there has been no, we've received no communication to state that they're looking at that or bringing that group back together, or that the numbers have changed significantly to, you know, have them warrant bringing the group back together to move from step 3 or to change, basically change that requirement. I don't know of any colleagues that are expecting that to come to pass in April, because we've seen nothing leading to it yet. We would welcome that, but at the same time, we're where we are now based on the current state guidance, and will, you know, as soon as I hear anything, I will definitely climb to the nearest mountaintop, which is Chipman Hill, and pronounce that.
Yeah, maybe we should include that in an FAQ, just because I know there's, well, certainly among secondary school parents, there is aspirational thinking that maybe the kids would be going back April 1st because of the governor's comment. So,
or maybe Peter could put that in one of his weekly communiques.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've mentioned it a couple times. I mentioned it right after he made that statement.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. To try to let people know, hey, like, we've heard nothing about that date or a plan or anything. So I have a feeling it was connected initially to looking at vaccinations and thinking about where we might be at that point. You know, one of the big challenges we have, and one of the unfortunate things that, from my vantage point, that happened was, you know, Vermont shifted from putting educators at the front of the line to now educators are just grouped along the age brackets. And I think my own personal belief is that that shouldn't have happened. I believe educators should be at the front of the line or where they were before in 1B. So I think that has an impact on bringing students back too. And I'm not sure how you know, to look at April 1st and then to not put the educators at the front of the vaccinations just doesn't, those two things don't necessarily coexist.
Agreed. That was really disappointing when they moved that.
Is there any indication that educators would be sort of the next in line after the 65 and older in pre-existing conditions?
I haven't heard anything to
California.
that effect. Yeah, I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
Got mine today.
All right. On that note, any other comments? All right, so I believe that's it, and I just need a motion to adjourn. Suzanne, thank you very much. All right, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Have a nice evening. Take care now.
All right.